Louisiana Democratic leaders held a 4th of July emergency summit on controversial politics back here at home. They're critical of Governor Landry's administration for what the leaders describe as an attack on democracy and black voting rights. U.S. Congressmen Troy Carter and Cleo Fields held the event at Dillard University today, along with over 24 elected officials. This comes after the legislature recently redrew Louisiana's congressional map to remove one black majority district, which Fields holds. That also led to Governor Jeff Landry's controversial decision to suspend the recent U.S. congressional primary election. Members of the summit also railed against recent Republican-backed laws eliminating judgeships and a clerk position in Orleans Parish. Their goal: sound the alarm and fight for fair representation in Louisiana.
Today we celebrate the 250th year birthday of our nation. It's very fitting that now we talk about that celebration, not just to talk about popping fireworks and having a day off. We are here and we are organized. We are not going to allow anyone, be it the president, the governor, or anybody else, strip us of our rights. We will not be divided. We will not be conquered. We will not fail.
Organizers say the summit is the first of many events they plan to hold ahead of the midterm elections in November.